The thunder didn't just roll. It cracked open the sky. Fiona Daniels gripped the bench, her knuckles white. The stagecoach was a toy in the storm, and the world outside was a brown, churning mess. The spring of 1878 had turned Montana into a flooded nightmare. "We gotta turn back, miss," the driver screamed over the wind. "That crossing's a death trap." "We can't!" Fiona yelled, clutching the small valise on her lap. Inside was the deed to her uncle's ranch, her only chance, her last hope after losing everything back east. "I've come too far," the driver cursed, a sound stolen by the storm. "It's your funeral, miss." He snapped the reins. The horses screamed, fighting the pull of the water as the wagon wheels vanished into the mud. For 1 second, Fiona thought they'd make it. Then came the crack. Not thunder, wood. A massive tree trunk hidden in the brown water slammed into the coach. The wagon didn't just tip, it exploded into splinters. "Jump!" the driver yelled, but it was too late. The floor vanished beneath her. The icy water was a physical blow. It stole her breath, dragging her down in a tangle of heavy skirts. She fought, but the current was a giant, angry hand. Her lungs burned. This was it. This was where her new beginning ended. Just as the blackness started to close in, a hand gripped her wrist. It wasn't a gentle grip. It was iron. She was hauled to the surface, gasping, choking, blinking water from her eyes. She was looking into the most startling blue eyes she'd ever seen. He was a stranger, a cowboy, his face all angles and granite, set against the chaos of the flood. "I've got you, madam," he said, his voice impossibly steady. "Don't let go." Fiona couldn't have let go if she tried. Her fingers dug into the rough fabric of his shirt as he kicked toward the bank, fighting the water with powerful strokes. Another surge hit them, trying to tear her away. "Hold on!" he shouted, his grip tightening. "I won't let go!" And he didn't. He dragged her from the river's grasp and onto the muddy bank. They collapsed, gasping, the rain still pouring down. "Thank you," Fiona stammered, her teeth chattering so hard she could barely speak. The cowboy pushed himself to his knees. He took off his hat, wrung the water from it, and settled it back on his head. "Mason Thornton, madam," he said, offering his hand again. "Let's get you warm before you catch your death." Fiona took his hand. "Fiona Daniels. I'm afraid. I've lost everything. Her valise, the deed, her money. Gone." Mason's gaze scanned the raging water, where the last pieces of the coach were vanishing downstream. His expression was grim. "Not everything, Miss Daniels," he said, his voice low. "You're still breathing." He pulled her to her feet. "But you lost more than you know." What did that mean? Before she could ask, he was leading her up the bank. She realized he was still holding her hand, and stranger still, she had no desire for him to let go. His horse, a sturdy palomino, was waiting under a cluster of pines, unfazed by the storm. "This is Sonny," Mason said, patting the horse's neck. "He's steady." Fiona looked at the animal. Back in Boston, horses were for parks. Here, they were lifeboats. "He won't bite," Mason said, a flicker of amusement in his eyes. He helped her mount, then swung up behind her. The warmth of his chest against her back was immediate, shocking. Fiona stiffened. This was not proper. "Apologies for the close quarters, Miss Daniels," he said, his breath warm against her ear. "My cabin's not far. We need to get you dry." As they rode, Fiona tried to process. Just hours ago, she was an heiress, on her way to claim the Bar D ranch, her Uncle Henry's legacy. Now she was a penniless survivor, riding double with a stranger who looked at the storm like it was just another Tuesday. "You're not from around here," Mason observed. It wasn't a question. "Is it that obvious?" "Your boots," he said. "Too fine." She looked down at her ruined leather boots. "I'm from Boston. I'm here to claim my uncle's property. Henry Daniels. He owned the Bar D ranch near Silver Creek." The man behind her went utterly still. His voice, when it came, was flat. Henry Daniels. You knew him? Fiona twisted, trying to see his face. Everyone knew Henry, Mason said, his voice tight. I knew him better than most. I was his foreman. Relief flooded Fiona, so strong it made her dizzy. Oh, thank heaven, then you can help me. I've lost the deed, but surely if you're his foreman— Miss Daniels, Mason interrupted. His voice was cold. The deed wouldn't matter. What? What do you mean? I mean the Bar D is gone. It's occupied. Squatters. Fiona's blood ran colder than the river water. Squatters? We can get the sheriff. We can show them. You don't understand, Mason said. He guided Sonny around a fallen log. These aren't just drifters. It's the Blackwater gang, and they're not squatting. He paused, and the next words hit her like a physical blow. They say they bought the ranch. Bought it? That's impossible. It was willed to me. They have a piece of paper, Miss Daniels, a deed of sale. And the man who holds it, Vince Holloway, he's not the kind of man you argue with. Fiona's hope shattered. But it's a fake. It must be. Maybe, Mason said, his voice hollow, but in this territory possession is everything, and they possess it. As they crested a hill, a small cabin came into view. Smoke curled from its chimney. Home, Mason said. He dismounted and reached up for her. His hands were strong, calloused, but they were gentle as they spanned her waist. He set her down, but his hands lingered. Their eyes met. It's not much, he said, clearing his throat and stepping back, but it's dry. Inside, the cabin was one room, spare but clean, a stone fireplace, a table, a single cot. Mason stoked the fire, and the flames leaped to life. You need to get out of those wet clothes, he said, moving to a trunk. He pulled out a faded flannel shirt and worn trousers. This is all I have. I'll tend to Sonny. He left. Fiona, shivering, peeled off her sodden dress. She changed into his clothes, rolling up the sleeves and pant legs. They smelled of pine and leather and smoke. When Mason returned, he paused in the doorway. His eyes raked over her, taking in the sight of her in his clothes. Fiona felt her cheeks burn. Thank you, Mr. Thornton, she said, trying to sound formal. Mason, he corrected. And it's no hardship. Out here, we help our neighbors. He hung a kettle over the fire. Tea, and I've got stew. As he moved around the small space, Fiona studied him. He was tall, broad-shouldered. His hair was dark, with a few strands of silver at the temples. He moved with a quiet competence. You were really his foreman? She asked. For 3 years, Mason said, not looking at her. Henry? He was a good man. Fair. Then you'll help me? Help me get my ranch back? Mason finally turned. His blue eyes were full of something she couldn't name. Regret. Miss Daniels. Fiona, you need to understand. Vince Holloway isn't just a squatter. He's dangerous. The whole town. They're afraid of him. And you? Are you afraid of him? Mason looked into the fire. I know what he's capable of. Henry didn't just pass away. His death was sudden. A new, terrible cold settled over her. Are you saying he was— I'm saying the doctor ruled it a heart ailment, Mason said, his voice tight. But Henry was as strong as an ox. This was worse than she could have imagined. Not just squatters, but murderers. Then we must go to the sheriff, she insisted. Sheriff Wells, in Silver Creek. Yes, Mason said. We'll go tomorrow. We'll see what he says. But there was no hope in his voice. That night, he insisted she take the cot. He made a pallet on the floor by the fire. Fiona lay awake, listening to the rain slow to a drizzle and the sound of Mason's steady breathing. She had come west for a new beginning. She hadn't realized she was walking into a war, and the only man who could help her. She wasn't sure if he was a partner or a prisoner of the same men who'd taken her home. The ride to Silver Creek was quiet. The world was washed clean. But Fiona felt dirty. Mason had provided her with a spare horse, a gentle bay. He rode beside her, lost in his own grim thoughts. Silver Creek was a single muddy street lined with false front buildings, the Rusty Spur Saloon, Jenkins' General Mercantile, and a small office with a simple sign, Sheriff. As they dismounted, Fiona saw men watching them from the saloon porch. Their eyes were cold. A tall man in a clean suit with a silver star pinned to his vest stepped out of the office. He had a politician's smile. "Mason Thornton," the man said, his voice smooth as honey. "Didn't expect to see you in town. And who is this?" "Sheriff Wells," Mason said, his voice flat. "This is Miss Fiona Daniels, Henry Daniels' niece." The sheriff's smile didn't falter, but his eyes went hard. "Miss Daniels, a pleasure. My deepest condolences on your uncle's passing. A true tragedy." "Sheriff," Fiona said, forcing her voice to be steady, "I've come to claim my uncle's property. Mr. Thornton tells me there are squatters." Sheriff Wells chuckled. "Squatters? Oh, no, miss. Not at all. The Bar D was sold, legally." Fiona's stomach dropped. "That's a lie. It was willed to me." "A will?" Wells feigned surprise. "We never found a will, Miss Daniels. Only a bill of sale. Your uncle. He must have changed his mind before he passed. Sold it to a Mr. Vince Holloway." "I don't believe you," Fiona said. "It's not a matter of belief," Wells said, his smile fading. "It's a matter of law. Mr. Holloway is in the saloon right now if you'd care to see the deed yourself." He gestured to the Rusty Spur. "Fiona, don't," Mason said, grabbing her arm. "I will," she said, shrugging him off. She marched across the street, her borrowed trousers flapping in the mud. She pushed open the saloon doors. The room went silent. Smoke hung thick in the air. At a back table, a mountain of a man with a black beard looked up. He was flanked by two hard-looking men. "Well, well," the man rumbled. "What have we here?" "Are you Vince Holloway?" Fiona demanded. "I am," he said, grinning, showing stained teeth. "You are illegally occupying my ranch." Holloway laughed, a harsh barking sound. "Your ranch? Lady, I bought this ranch, fair and square." He slapped a folded paper on the table. "Deed of sale, signed, sealed, and legal." Fiona snatched the paper. She scanned the lines of looping script. It described the Bar D. It named Vince Holloway as the buyer. And then she saw the signature at the bottom. It wasn't Henry Daniels. It was signed Mason Thornton, foreman by proxy. The blood drained from her face. She turned, her whole body shaking, to look at Mason, who had followed her in. He was staring at the paper, his face pale. "You," she whispered. You sold it." The entire saloon was watching. Holloway was grinning. Sheriff Wells was standing in the doorway looking smug. "Fiona," Mason started, his voice a low plea. "You sold my uncle's ranch. To him?" Mason looked at Holloway, then at the sheriff, then back at Fiona. His jaw clenched. He looked like a man in a trap. "Yes," he said, his voice cracking. "I did." The betrayal was so total, so absolute, it knocked the air from her lungs. Her only ally. The man who had saved her life. He was the one who had stolen it. Fiona didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just felt cold. She threw the deed at his feet. "You're a monster." She turned and ran from the saloon, shoving past the smiling sheriff. She ran until her lungs burned, not caring where she was going, just needing to get away from his face. She heard him running after her, calling her name, but she didn't stop. He caught her by the arm at the edge of town, spinning her around. "Let go of me!" she screamed, hitting his chest. "Fiona, stop! You don't understand!" he yelled, grabbing her wrists. "I understand perfectly. You murdered my uncle, or you helped them. You stole my home. No!" His voice was raw pain. "I didn't. They made me." "Made you? They put a gun to your head?" "Yes!" he shouted. "Worse!" His eyes were desperate. "Please, just come with me. I have to show you. Then you can judge." She didn't want to go anywhere with him, but the agony in his eyes. It wasn't fake. "5 minutes, Mason," she said, her voice shaking. "Then I go to the U.S. Marshals." "There's no time," he said, pulling her. "This way. We can't be seen." He led her not to his cabin, but to a different one, smaller, hidden in a grove of aspens behind the livery. It looked abandoned. "What is this?" she demanded. Mason didn't answer. He pushed open the creaking door. Inside, the cabin was dark. It smelled of sickness. A small child was huddled on a cot, wrapped in a threadbare blanket. A little girl, maybe 6 years old, with pale skin and huge, frightened eyes. Fiona stopped dead. "This," Mason said, his voice thick, "is Lily, my daughter." Fiona stared at the child, then at Mason. You have a daughter?" Mrs. Jenkins said. "She said you lost your family." "I lost my wife," Mason said, his voice breaking. Lily is all I have left." He knelt by the cot. "Hey, Sweet Pea, I brought a friend." The little girl just stared, her thumb in her mouth. "What does this have to do with—" Fiona started. "They have her," Mason whispered, his back to her. "Wells and Holloway. They've had her for months." The pieces slammed into place. They're holding her hostage," Fiona breathed. "Yes." Mason stood, his face a mask of shame and fury. "They murdered Henry. Then they came for me. They knew I was the only one who could legally sign for the ranch if Henry was missing. They took Lily. They told me. They told me to sign the fake deed, to play along, to tell anyone who asked that Holloway bought it fair and square, or I'd never see her again. My God, Mason. They let me see her once a week, to feed her, to make sure I keep my mouth shut." He looked at the girl. "She's sick. She needs a real doctor. But Wells, he has Dr. Wilson in his pocket, too. He signed the fake death certificate, the whole town. The whole town is his." Fiona finally understood. The cold eyes. The fear. The way Mason had looked trapped. He was trapped. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Tell you what?" he snapped. "That my life is over? That your ranch is gone for good? That I'm a coward who sold your inheritance to save his child? I was going to. I don't know. I just—" He ran his hands through his hair. "I saved you from the river, and I brought you into this." Fiona's anger was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. This wasn't about land anymore. This wasn't about a deed. This was about a child. "No, Mason," she said, her voice firm. He looked up, surprised. "You didn't bring me into this. They did. And now—" She looked at the small, sick girl. "Now they have 2 of us to fight." Mason stared at her. "Fight? Fiona, they have guns. They have the law. They have my daughter. And we have the truth," Fiona said. "And we have you. You're the key. You're the one they forced. Your testimony. It's the only thing that can undo that deed." "My testimony will get Lily killed," he said flatly. "Not if we're smart," Fiona said, her mind racing, the fog of grief and betrayal replaced by a chilling clarity. "They made one mistake. They let me live, and they let you and I, find each other." She knelt by the cot. "Hello, Lily," she said softly. The little girl flinched. "We're going to get you out of here," Fiona promised. She stood and looked at Mason. "We need help. Real help, not the sheriff. Who in this town isn't on his payroll?" Mason thought for a long, agonizing moment. "Mrs. Jenkins," he said finally. "At the general store. Her husband was the first sheriff. She hates Wells, and maybe Dr. Wilson. He's a coward, but he's not evil. He's just trapped, like me." "Then that's where we start," Fiona said. We're not just getting the ranch back, Mason. We're getting your daughter back. We're taking the whole town back." Mason looked at her, really looked at her. The broken, wet woman from the river was gone. In her place was someone he didn't recognize, someone made of steel. "They'll kill us all," he whispered. "Only if they see us coming," Fiona replied. The root cellar beneath Jenkins' General Mercantile was damp and smelled of earth and potatoes. He murdered Henry. Mrs. Jenkins, a stout woman with iron-gray hair, sank onto a sack of flour. Her face was pale. "And he's holding Mason's daughter hostage to cover it up," Fiona said, her voice low. Mrs. Jenkins looked at Mason, her eyes full of a new, sad understanding. "Mason, all this time, we thought you'd turned." "It was the only way to keep her alive," Mason said, his voice thick. "That devil," Mrs. Jenkins whispered. "That devil in a starched suit. He's been bleeding this town dry for a year. Land grabs, protection fees. We all knew, but a child. And Henry." There was a scuffing sound at the cellar door. Mason had his gun out in a second. "It's just me," a quavering voice said. Dr. Wilson stumbled down the steps, his hands shaking. I saw you come in here. I can't do it anymore. I can't." He collapsed onto a crate. "He made me sign it. Henry Daniels. There wasn't a mark on him. But his heart, it just stopped. That's what Wells told me it did. And I signed the certificate." "You can fix this, doctor," Fiona said, her voice sharp. "You can tell the truth." "And Holloway will put a bullet in my head," Wilson cried, "just like he did to Henry." So it was true. Fiona's last hope died. Her uncle was murdered. "There's a circuit judge," Fiona said, grabbing the doctor's arm. "He's due in Silver Creek." "When?" "A week," Mrs. Jenkins said. "Judge Harrison. He's a hard man, but he's fair. He's the only man Wells is afraid of." "Then that's our timeline," Fiona said. "A week. We need proof. Not just your testimony, doctor. We need something they can't deny." "The will," Mason said, his eyes lighting up. "Henry had a will. I saw him write it. He left everything to you. He had me witness it." "And where is that will?" Fiona asked. "Wells," Mason said. When they took Henry, they ransacked the office. Wells took Henry's lockbox. I'm sure he kept it." "Why would he keep it?" Dr. Wilson asked. "As a trophy," Fiona and Mason said at the same time. Fiona looked at Mason. "He's got the fake deed. He's got your daughter. And he's got the real will. He holds all the cards." "His office," Mason said. "He keeps everything in a safe in his office. The deed, the will. Probably blackmail on half the territory." "Then the plan is simple," Fiona said, ignoring the tremor in her hands. "We get into that safe. We get the will. And we get Lily. And we present all of it to Judge Harrison the second he rides into town." "Get into the safe," Mrs. Jenkins said. "Mason, it's impossible." "No," Mason said. He was looking at Fiona, and for the first time since the river, she saw a spark of the man who had pulled her out. A spark of the fight he'd lost. "I helped Henry install that safe. I know the combination." The cellar was silent. He changed it, surely," Dr. Wilson stammered. "Maybe," Mason said, "but Wells is arrogant. He probably didn't think he needed to. He thinks everyone is too scared to try." "He's right," Mrs. Jenkins said. "He was," Fiona corrected. "He didn't count on me, and he underestimated you." "We can't just walk in," Mason said, thinking. "Holloway or his men are in that office with him most of the day, and he locks it at night. 2 locks. Then we go in at night," Fiona said, "and we'll need a distraction, a big one. Something to pull Wells and Holloway both out of the center of town." Mrs. Jenkins looked up, her eyes narrowing. "The old livery, at the end of town. The one Holloway seized for back taxes last month. It's full of dry hay." A slow smile spread across Fiona's face. "A fire." "A fire?" Dr. Wilson yelped. "A controlled fire," Fiona said. "Enough to cause a panic, enough to pull every man, including the sheriff, to the south end of town. That will give you, what, 10 minutes?" 10 minutes is all I need," Mason said. "This is insane," Dr. Wilson said. "We'll all be hanged." "We'll be hanged if we don't, Doctor," Mrs. Jenkins said, getting to her feet. Her face was hard. "Henry Daniels was my friend, and that man has a child in a shed. I'll get you the kerosene, Fiona." The plan was set for 3 nights later, the night before the judge was due. Mason would retrieve Lily first, hiding her in the root cellar. Then Fiona would start the fire. While the town ran to the livery, Mason would slip into the sheriff's office and get the will. It was simple. It was terrifying. The night of the plan, the air was cold and still. Too still. Fiona's heart was a hammer against her ribs. Mason had slipped out an hour ago. He was supposed to be back with Lily. He was late. Every minute that ticked by was agony. What if he'd been caught? What if Wells had moved her? Just as she was about to panic, the cellar door creaked. Mason slipped in, carrying Lily. The girl was asleep, bundled in his coat. She has a fever," he whispered, his voice rough. He handed her gently to Mrs. Jenkins, who had blankets and broth waiting. "Go," Mrs. Jenkins ordered him. "Go. I'll guard her with my life." Mason looked at Fiona. "It's time. Be safe," she whispered. "You too." He kissed her. It wasn't a romantic kiss. It was desperate, a kiss that tasted of fear and gunpowder. Then he was gone. Fiona waited 5 minutes. She picked up the small can of kerosene. Her hands were shaking so badly she spilled some. She slipped out the back of the store. The street was dark, empty. The only light came from the saloon. She crept along the alleyways, her heart in her throat. The old livery was a dark shape at the end of the street. She splashed the kerosene on a pile of hay near the back wall. She struck a match. Her hand was shaking. She struck another. The flame caught. It didn't catch slowly. It exploded. The dry hay went up with a whoosh that knocked her backward. "Too much," she whispered in horror. "That was too much." A man shouted from the saloon. "Fire! Fire at the old livery!" The town woke up. Men poured out of the saloon, out of the hotel. She saw Sheriff Wells come running from his office, Holloway right behind him. "Get a bucket brigade!" Wells yelled, running toward the flames, which were already licking the sky. It was working. The street was clear. Fiona ran, not back to the store, but to the shadows across from the sheriff's office, her heart pounding. She saw a shadow detach itself from the alley. Mason. He picked the lock, slipped inside. He was in. She waited. 1 minute. 2. The whole town was at the fire. The flames were huge now, threatening the next building. Suddenly, 2 of Holloway's men broke away from the bucket line. "The boss said to check the office," one of them growled, jogging back toward her. "No," Fiona breathed. "No, no, no." They were halfway down the street. Mason was still inside. Fiona had to do something. She couldn't let them walk in. She stepped out of the shadows. "Help!" she screamed, stumbling into the middle of the street. The 2 men stopped, startled. "What are you doing here, lady?" I fell," she cried, clutching her ankle. "I think it's broken, please. The fire. I can't walk." The men looked at each other, annoyed. "Just stay put. We gotta—" "Please," she shrieked, collapsing onto the muddy street. "It hurts," one of the men cursed. "Fine. Hank, go check the office. I'll deal with this." The one named Hank grunted and kept walking toward the office. Fiona's blood ran cold. It hadn't worked. Just as Hank reached the door, it burst open. Mason slammed into him, a man possessed. He didn't use his gun, he used his fists, a brutal driving punch that sent Hank sprawling. In his other hand, Mason was clutching a small, leather-bound box. He had it. "He was in the safe!" Hank screamed. The other man drew his gun. "Mason! Stop!" Mason didn't stop. He ran, zigzagging as the man fired. The bullet sparked off the dirt near his feet. Fiona scrambled up, her fake injury forgotten. She ran for the general store. Mason was right behind her. Another shot. Mason grunted, stumbling. "Mason! I'm hit!" he yelled. "Go! Get in the cellar! Lock it!" He shoved her toward the back door of the store just as Wells and Holloway, their faces black with soot, rounded the corner. "He's got the box!" Holloway roared. Fiona tumbled into the store, Mason falling in behind her. He slammed the heavy oak door and dropped the bar. Mrs. Jenkins was at the cellar door, her eyes wide. "He's hit!" Fiona screamed. They half-dragged, half-carried Mason down the steps. "My arm!" he grunted, slumping against the potato sacks. "It's just my arm!" Fiona ripped his sleeve. Blood was soaking the flannel, a clean shot through the shoulder. It's not bad," Dr. Wilson said, his hands shaking as he pulled out bandages. "It missed the bone." Lily started to cry, woken by the noise. "Hush, sweet pea," Mason gritted out, his face pale with pain. "Papa's here." Above them, the front door of the store splintered. "Mason!" Sheriff Wells's voice was a roar. "Give me the box, Mason! Give it to me or I burn this place to the ground with you and the girl in it!" They were trapped. The heavy cellar door was the only thing between them and a dozen armed men. "He'll do it," Mrs. Jenkins whispered, clutching a shotgun. "He'll kill us all." Mason, bleeding against the wall, looked at the lockbox in his lap. He fumbled it open. Inside, nestled on velvet, was a single, folded document. Henry Daniels' last will and testament. "He kept it," Mason breathed. "The arrogant fool." He handed it to Fiona. It's all up to you now." "What do you mean?" Fiona said. They're not getting this will," he said. He looked at his daughter, who was crying in Mrs. Jenkins' arms. "Open the back grate," Mason ordered the doctor. "The one that leads to the alley." "They'll be watching it," Wilson whimpered. "They're watching the front," Mason said. "Fiona, take Lily, take the will, run. Don't stop running until you find the judge's coach. It's due at dawn. It's the only way." "What? Mason, no, I'm not leaving you." "Yes, you are," he snarled, pushing himself up. "I'm not letting them get her, and I'm not letting them get that will. I'm going to buy you time." "What kind of time?" "Enough." He grabbed the shotgun from Mrs. Jenkins. "Doc, you and Mrs. Jenkins, you go with her. Protect them." "Mason, no!" Fiona was crying now. "I signed that deed, Fiona," he said, his voice soft. "I let this happen. This is how I fix it." He kissed his daughter's head. "I love you, Lily." He kissed Fiona. "I love you too. Now go." "Mason, open this door!" Wells roared from upstairs. They could hear them smashing furniture. "I won't leave you," Fiona said. "She's right," Mrs. Jenkins said, leveling the shotgun. "We don't run. This is my town. This is your ranch. We fight. Right here." Mason looked at the three of them. The terrified doctor, the iron-willed old woman, and Fiona, her face streaked with tears but her eyes burning with a fire that matched the one still raging outside. "Then we fight," he said. Suddenly from the street, a new sound. A loud, clear voice. "What in God's name is going on here?" The smashing upstairs stopped. It's the judge," Dr. Wilson whispered. "He's early." A cold, terrifying silence fell over the store above them. Fiona looked at Mason. "This is it." "Sheriff Wells!" The voice boomed again. "Report!" Fiona didn't wait. She grabbed the will. "Stay here with Lily," she told Mason. "Bar this door. Don't open it until I say so." "Fiona, no. They'll shoot you on sight." "They won't," she said, her voice shaking but clear. "Not in front of a federal judge, Mrs. Jenkins. Doctor, you're with me." Before Mason could stop her, she unbarred the cellar door and climbed the steps. The store was a wreck. Furniture was overturned. Sacks of flour were split open. Sheriff Wells and Holloway were standing by the front door, their guns drawn, their faces a mask of shock. Outside, in the pre-dawn light, sat a stagecoach. A tall, severe-looking man with steel-gray hair stood beside it. Judge Harrison. "Your Honor," Wells said, trying to regain his composure. He slicked his hair back. We've had a fire, and we've cornered the men responsible. A gang of rustlers. They're barricaded in the cellar." Judge Harrison looked at the burning livery, then at the ransacked store. "Rustlers? Looks to me like you're laying siege to a general store, Sheriff." Fiona stepped out onto the boardwalk. Her dress was torn. Her face was smudged with soot. She was holding the will. "He's lying, Your Honor," she said, her voice ringing out in the quiet street. Wells and Holloway spun around. Their faces went white. "That's one of them now," Wells yelled, raising his pistol. "Put that weapon down, Sheriff," Judge Harrison commanded. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the tension like a knife. Wells hesitated, his gun hand shaking. "My name," Fiona said, walking toward the judge, "is Fiona Daniels. I am the legal owner of the Bar D Ranch, and this man, Sheriff Wells, murdered my uncle, Henry Daniels, to steal it." The townspeople, gathered to fight the fire, went dead silent. "That's a crazy accusation," Wells stammered. "Is it?" Fiona said. "Or is it the truth you've been holding over this town for a year?" She held up the will. "This is my uncle's true will, the one he left in his safe, the one Sheriff Wells stole after he had him murdered." "It's a fake!" Holloway roared. "Then perhaps Dr. Wilson can clear this up," Fiona called out. Dr. Wilson stepped out from the store, shaking from head to toe, but he walked forward. "Doctor," the judge said, "what is the meaning of this?" Wilson looked at Wells, who was staring at him with pure murder in his eyes. He took a deep breath. It's true, Your Honor. I signed a false death certificate. Henry Daniels, he was poisoned. The sheriff, he made me do it." A gasp went through the crowd. "And what about the deed?" Fiona pressed, her voice gaining strength. "The one that gives the ranch to Mr. Holloway?" It's a forgery," Wilson cried, the words tumbling out. "Sheriff Wells and Holloway, they're partners. They've been stealing land all over the county." "He's lying," Wells shouted. "They're all in on it." "No, Sheriff," Fiona said, her voice cold. "There's one more piece of proof. The reason you thought you had everyone under your thumb." She turned to the store. "Mason, bring her out." The cellar door opened. Mason emerged, his arm in a bloody sling, his face pale. He was leading his daughter Lily by the hand. "They held his child hostage, Your Honor," Fiona said. "They forced Mason Thornton, my uncle's foreman, to sign the fake deed. They threatened to kill this little girl if he ever spoke the truth." The crowd turned. This was no longer about land. It was about a child. The murmuring turned to a low growl. Judge Harrison looked at the terrified girl. He looked at the bloody sling on Mason's arm. He looked at the will in Fiona's hand. And his face became a mask of cold fury. "Vince Holloway," the judge said. "Sheriff Wells, you are under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, and the murder of Henry Daniels." Wells snapped. He didn't go for the judge. He went for Fiona. He lunged, grabbing her, pulling her in front of him as a shield. He pressed his gun to her head. "Nobody moves!" he screamed. "Nobody!" Holloway and his men drew their guns, backing him up. "It's over, Wells!" Mason yelled, pushing Lily behind him. "It's over when I say it's over!" Wells shrieked, dragging Fiona backward. "Drop your guns, all of you, or I'll kill her! I'll kill her right here!" Mason's face was agony. He had his pistol, but he couldn't get a clear shot. "Do it, Mason," Fiona whispered, her eyes locked on his. "Don't let him win." "Shut up!" Wells screamed, tightening his grip. He never saw it coming. Mrs. Jenkins, forgotten in the doorway of her store, had been holding her shotgun. She didn't aim for Wells. She aimed for the man beside him. The boom of the shotgun echoed down the street, deafening. Vince Holloway looked down, shocked at the hole in his chest. He collapsed. In that split second of confusion, as Wells flinched at the blast, Mason fired. The shot was perfect. Wells's hand flew open. His gun clattered to the boardwalk. He stared at his shattered wrist, his face a mask of disbelief. The rest of the Blackwater gang, seeing Holloway dead and Wells disarmed, threw down their guns. It was over. Fiona stumbled away from Wells, falling into Mason's good arm. He held her, shaking, as the townspeople surged forward, surrounding the sheriff. Justice. It had come, not just for her, but for Lily, for Mrs. Jenkins, for Dr. Wilson, for the whole town. Fiona stood on the porch of the Bardee ranch, her ranch, watching the sunset. It had taken 6 months to rebuild. 6 months of hard work, of clearing out the filth left by the gang, of hiring new hands, of pulling the ranch back from the brink. Judge Harrison had upheld the will. The fake deed was burned. Wells and his men were on their way to the gallows. And Dr. Wilson, given a suspended sentence for his testimony, had quietly moved away. Fiona heard footsteps behind her. Mason walked onto the porch, carrying Lily on his shoulders. The little girl, her cheeks now full and rosy, was laughing. "She helped me mend the corral fence," Mason said, swinging her down. He was no longer the haunted, trapped man she'd met. His name was cleared. He was a hero. And he was, once again, the foreman of the Bardee. "Go wash up for supper, sweet pea," he told his daughter, who ran inside, slamming the door. He turned to Fiona, his blue eyes soft in the fading light. "You've done wonders with this place, Fiona," he said. "Henry, he'd be proud." "We did," Fiona corrected him. "I couldn't have. I wouldn't be here without you." "I think about that," Mason said, moving to stand beside her at the railing. "I think about what would have happened if I'd been a second later, at the river." "But you weren't," she said softly. "No," he said. "I wasn't." He took her hand, his calloused, strong hand, the one that had pulled her from the water. "You know, I told Sheriff Wells I'd stay on as long as you needed me," he said, his voice low. "I know," Fiona said, her heart beating faster. "The thing is, the ranch is running fine now. You don't really need me anymore, Fiona." Fiona turned to face him. "Is that what you think?" I... Mason Thornton," she said, stepping closer. "I may not need a foreman, but I was hoping." She reached up, touching his face. "I was hoping you'd consider staying on. As a partner." He looked at her, searching her eyes. "A partner?" "In every sense of the word," she whispered. His smile, when it came, was like the sun breaking through the clouds. "Fiona." He didn't say anything else. He just pulled her to him, his good arm wrapping around her waist, and kissed her. It wasn't a desperate kiss, like the one in the alley. It was a kiss that tasted of hope, and pine smoke, and second chances. When he finally let her go, they were both breathless. "I love you, Fiona Daniels," he said, his voice rough. "I think I have since the moment I saw you gasping on that riverbank." "And I love you, Mason Thornton," she replied, leaning her head on his chest. They stood together, watching the stars come out over their valley, their ranch, their home. She had come west looking for an inheritance. She'd lost everything. And in the end, in the mud and the fear and the fight, she'd found it all. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. And let me know in the comments, what would you have done if you found out the man who saved you was the one who stole your future?